Hello and good morning. So today I'm going to be talking about divorce and its controversialness in the church today and in the past. The textbook definition of divorce is the legal separation between a married couple. Divorce has been a controversial topic not only in the church, but in different types of cultures, in different types of generations. Today, divorce is more common not only in the church, but all around the world due to the fact that society has lessened its value in marriage, divorce, etc. The first side that we will be talking about today is that divorce is not a sin. It is okay. Most people who have this mentality usually go back to the Old Testament, where Moses allowed the Jews to get a divorce and gave them a whole bunch of scenarios where it is okay to get a divorce and it is not a sin. They usually don't accept that what Jesus said and the other apostles had said in the New Testament. They consider it not fit for our time. It was meant for their time and that set of people, the Jews and the Gentiles, and that what the Old Testament said about divorce is what all Christians should stand by, live by, and use. Also, during the 1900s, give or take, most people started to lose their value on marriage and divorce. It wasn't a sacred bond anymore. It was just something you do because everybody else was sort of doing it. It was just part of society, just to get married, have a family, and live your life. But most people didn't really care about marriage, so divorce was quite common. And those young people who lived during that time was influenced by that view, and so it was influenced in the church, and it is continuing to today. The other side of divorce is that it is wrong, and that a married couple should be together unless there are unique circumstances. Most people who are for divorce usually think that the people against divorce think that there is no unique circumstances. It's either yes or no. But there is mentioned in the Bible that Jesus and others gave various examples of exceptions of getting a divorce. Most people who agree that divorce is wrong are usually like an older person. You won't usually find a young person saying divorce is wrong. I say old people, not old people, but the older people, because they grew up in a society where marriage was valued and you should care for a marriage and your spouse. Unlike today, or at least a few years ago, where divorce is not as sacred or taken to heart as back in the day. Also, Christians who are against divorce without the unique circumstances usually would say to someone who was thinking about getting a divorce or got a divorce that they should have prayed. They should have asked God to lead them to the right path, to find the right person so they wouldn't be in this situation, and that not praying about finding the right one wasn't wise and led to that situation. People in the church, however, don't really have an opinion on divorce. It's really a not a minute, because nothing in the Bible is minute, but it's sort of the small fish in a big pond type of situation where there's so many controversial topics in the church that people disagree on, that divorce is just one of the however many things that people disagree on. There are bigger things that people disagree on, and divorce is just one of the smaller ones, I guess. So, the church history I'm going to be mentioning, but I'm just going to mention 3 out of however many they are. So the first person I'm going to mention is Origen of Alexandria. He is one of the greatest Christian theologians. He is also known for the First Principles, which was written about Christian Neoplatonism. He wrote a commentary on Matthew, which we know deals with divorce and other Christian livelihood type of things. He noted that Christ rejected the idea that a wife was to be put away for every cause, but he did not seem to rule out divorce completely. He admitted that some church leaders have permitted a divorced woman. So as we can see, he clearly follows what Jesus and some of the other apostles followed. He wasn't opposed to anything. He clearly saw everything, but he also mentioned that church leaders also have accepted women who were divorced, which isn't really necessarily a bad thing. Most people see that sentence and they're like, oh my goodness, why did he do that? When in fact, we don't necessarily know why they accepted them. It could have followed the reasonings that Jesus and the other apostles have laid out for us that getting divorced is acceptable. The next person is Ambrose of Milan. He was a Roman doctor, a Bible critic, and a teacher who converted and baptized St. Augustine of Hippo, and he is also known as a great Christian theologian. He mentioned in the year 389 AD that if you dismiss your wife, therefore as if by right and without being charged with wrongdoing. Don't think it's right because there is no human law, but know that the divine law forbids it. So clearly by that sentence, he was also a stickler for the rules that getting a divorce is wrong. He also mentioned something that was quite interesting that resonates with almost every type of sin, that even if there isn't a human law forbidding what it is, as long as it's in the Bible, Jesus and others obviously say that no, this is not what God wants. He wants you to do this instead. Even though there's not actually a human law forbidding what you're doing, God knows what you're doing all the time, and if it's wrong, you will have consequences for that, even if it's not an actual law that you will get punished for in the world. Finally, the last person or work is a Shepherd of Hermas. Unlike the other two, this is not a person. This is a book written by the brother of Pius, who was a bishop of Rome, but we don't actually know who is the author of this book, because that's just a speculation, and that's just the more likely known author of the book. In the book, the author talks about many biblical ideas, including divorce. It says it deals with whether a husband sins if he continues to live with an adulterous wife. There is no option but to divorce her, but they cannot remarry. But whoever was being adulterous asks for forgiveness and the other accepts, they can be remarried, a couple again. This is really similar to what is mentioned in Deuteronomy about divorce. Moses, while he's explaining the divorce process and what is acceptable and what is not, this process is known that if you get a divorce and then you remarry and then you get a divorce again from that second person, you can remarry the first person if they forgive you. Or even if you get separated from the first person, your first spouse, then you can ask for forgiveness, and if that person accepts your apology, you can get remarried without getting a divorce, which I thought was interesting because it was mixing what people know in the New Testament and with the Old Testament to make a nice marriage. So in the last 200 years, divorce has been pretty consistent outside and inside of the church. As we know, the church not only the church, but religion in general has the lowest divorce rates. People during that time, during those last 200 years, held marriage to a very high standard. Most people didn't get divorced. It wasn't the norm. You get married, you have how many ever kids, you keep your line going, and then it's that end. It wasn't like normal to get a divorce than it was now. But so around the 70s, 60s, around that time, the divorce rate up till now has gotten higher. In the 1900s, the divorce rate in America was 9%. And if Christianity as well as other religions had less divorce rates than the world, then that means our divorce rate was lower than 9%. Today, in 2020, the divorce rate is 26%, which isn't that much higher, but it's significantly higher. So next, the verses. So, as I mentioned before, there are many verses in the Bible that has dealt with the issue of divorce. One of the main verses is found in 1 Corinthians 7:10-11, and then verse 15. Paul is speaking to the church in Corinth, telling them that the Lord doesn't want a marriage to be separated. But if they do go through with it, they cannot remarry. So it's like you can technically separate, but you can't remarry. It's like you have to do this, but you can't get this. Most people who don't accept divorce usually use this verse as their most common verse, or the verse in Matthew 5:32 where Jesus says you can't get a divorce unless one commits adultery. Another verse is Deuteronomy 24 verse 1. Here Moses explains to the Jewish people how you can get a divorce, what is acceptable in front of God, what you cannot do. So finally is the application. So personally, for my opinion, when I first started this project, I was towards the middle, like most people are. I really didn't have a big opinion on divorce. I just thought it was something minute. It wasn't really a big deal to me if you got a divorce or not. It was just it doesn't really matter. But while doing my research, reading the verses, finding other things that other articles and such have written about, I've learned that divorce, along with other big controversial topics, is actually important. That even though to us people we consider divorce and other topics minute and small, everything is equal in God's eyes, and that you can't pick and choose what you accept and don't accept. For example, the people who are for divorce, they use the Old Testament to back up what their claim was, and they choose not to accept what Jesus said in the New Testament. However, what does that stop for me to choose to pick that in order for me to be forgiven for my sins, I need to sacrifice a lamb instead of following what Jesus says that you're automatically forgiven for your sin. The thing is that even if it's small, it applies to everything else big, where you can't pick and choose because it doesn't suit what your wants are. Everything is right if God says it is, so don't question whether it's what you want or what you need, because it's all right if God says it is. Also, when you're faced with people, when we go off into like college, and not only college but in the workplace, when people try to discredit God and the Bible, and they try to find the loopholes, you can explain to them, here, this is it. You can't pick and choose of what you want. Some stuff you can. I'm not gonna lie. Like some things that God doesn't really give us specific answer for. Some things that's just a topic in general, but he doesn't give you a definitive answer if it's wrong or right. You can have your opinions on that. But some things like divorce, like salvation, like forgiving of your sins, you can't really justify because Jesus gives us a definitive answer of what's right and what's wrong, and we can't change that because of what we want. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned, and I hope you found more information on divorce than you did before. I hope that you learned more things that you didn't know before, like I did, and I hope you picked a side if you didn't already, or if you did, you changed your side if it wasn't the right answer. So yeah, thank you.